Well, good afternoon, everyone. The H1B Guy here, and today, the H1B Guy Live with Sophie Alcorn, founder of Alcorn Immigration Law, for a live discussion around H1B layoffs, the H1B lottery, and hopefully taking some of your questions and comments. But before we get started, I'd like to ask you if you have, please subscribe to the H1B Guy channel on YouTube and like this video to produce more content like this for you. I also wanted to mention the H1B Guy offers I help businesses solve complex work author recruitment process, awareness to employment-based immigration benefits. If I can help you, please reach out. I'd love to hear how. And you can directly with me via the com. Today's live stream is proudly brought to you by and Path to Canada for high-skilled immigrants currently located in the U.S. whose status may be by PERM-ads.com, the industry and immigration attorneys navigating the complex PERM recruitment ad phase of the labor mob squad. Are you a technology professional facing challenges? Don't leave your fate up to chance. Our partner, Mob Squad, has the solution. Squad. Well, I'd like to the H1B Guy Live, and just a little quick background here. Founded Alcorn Immigration in 2015, and I became aware of you, Sophie, from your Dear Sophie column on TechCrunch that 19. But really over, I'd say, the last 3 months, you have appeared on the national circuit, national outlets, discussing these massive layoffs, specifically around H1B layoffs, and really trying to provide options for individuals been impacted, or the big tech that we've seen out there. Really appreciate and say thank you so much. Really appreciative of your time. Wanted to have you on to talk about the lottery specifically, and also, and then kind of a look ahead of what you're seeing and thinking about going to as we move forward in 2020. So thank you so much for just morning your time, afternoon my time.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, thank you.
No,
really
so
appreciate
great to be here. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for everything you do to keep people aware of what's going on. And I love your approach. And as immigration lawyers, we're like, oh yeah, we know everything about immigration, but really we know the legal aspects, but there's so many social, political, strategic, compliance, human, other business sides of the whole thing. And I just love the way that you bring light to the whole, everything about H1Bs. So thank you. And it's an honor to be here.
That means a lot. I know we share many mutuals, and I think this is a good time to mention I had the opportunity to join you on your podcast, episode 129. Right. There's a link in the description of the video for those that haven't maybe listened to that before. Immigration component of what's going on in our world right now, and I think that's also a good reminder, disclaimer, right? Like I talk about that on the channel all the time. Anything I talk about, opinions for entertainment purposes. However, you are an immigration attorney, legal advice, so it's a good balance.
But then my disclaimer is this is not legal advice. This is for educational purposes. If you want individual legal advice, please go talk to an immigration lawyer. Yep. Whether you're a company or you're a person with an H1B, this is general. Yep. We're here to comment on the overall situation.
Exactly, and I anytime somebody reaches out to me and asks, hey, do you have an immigration firm that you can refer over? I always mention Alcorn Immigration Law of, kind of my preferred recommendations. And you guys have handled cases for individuals in the past. And, just absolute excellent feedback, the professionalism of you and your team. And so really excited to have you in and just kind
Thanks.
of jump right into
Oh
it
my God,
here.
where should we start? There's so much.
I think we should start with the September look ahead go to. And I think on the staffing side, we see some men shifting, and you started to see some of the impact of the excessive hiring 21 and continued really kind of through the 2022.
Excessive hiring.
And then
what? No, that was all justified by valid
COVID.
business needs.
Right. Exactly. I think that that we've seen from a lot of projects that were being ramped up during kind of the pandemic window, that 2-year time frame.
Yeah.
And then I to see the cuts happening, variety of verticals, but a lot of tech driven, and so that creates a lot of panic and hysteria in the staffing world, tech staffing, but the demand's still been extremely high. And the thing that I found most
things about this, there's still a vast number of tech job openings in the United States. So it's like, what is happening here? But we felt it even in May of 2022. After H1B season, it was like, oh, great, the great resignation. There's going to be so many companies that need to hire people. Let's keep going. Those COVID numbers were still like the business result, the financial aspects of the post-COVID, business boom, right? We were still feeling it. But what we saw in the world, because we work with a lot of our very early stage technology startups and immigrant founders, and they're rapidly scaling teams. And what we saw in that world was these like black swan memos and the VCs being like, conserve your capital. There might be some sort of financial event coming, and we don't want you frittering away our VC dollars on mindlessly expanding headcount because that might not be necessary anymore. So we were like, wait a minute, we were expecting another 2021 boom. Where did this go? So I totally know what you're saying. It's just money became more expensive.
Yeah, and going back to May, all of that application window for the 2023 H1B June. So you have this occurrence in the middle of the application window. One of the most interesting things that you've talked about is for H1Bs impacted layoffs, right? The 60-day window. We've seen legislators request it up to 80 days. USCIS comes out, I think it's going to stay at 60 days. So for me, right, like outside of leaving the country, if I'm an H1B impacted by a layoff, what is the best option for me depending on my situation?
Okay, so if you're worried about getting laid off, but you haven't been laid off, the things you can do before getting laid off are either apply for a second concurrent H1B to work part-time at another company. There might be intellectual property ramifications of this or employment law ramifications with your existing employer separate from immigration law. So please work with a lawyer to figure those out. But immigration law allows you to have 2 H1Bs at a time. So if you went through the lottery, you're working for some company for 40 hours a week and you want like insurance, you could go to a small company and they could sponsor you for a 5 or 10 hour a week H1B, and you can work there part-time when it's approved. And then that way, if the big company lays you off, you're not out of status. You're still maintaining active H1B status, even for 5 hours a week. And then that other company, you can either ramp up your hours or just continue part-time as you then layer in another full-time job eventually. So that's like the easiest way to get more time runway. If you have been laid off and you're looking at that 60-day grace period, one thing to try to negotiate with your employer before you sign the severance package is, hey, in lieu of that cash, because I have a lot of savings, but in lieu of that cash, could I please like extend my last day? And can I please legitimately keep working at your company and maintain my access and actually do work for you until a later end date? Because the 60 days is calculated after the cessation of employment. And I think it's risky if somebody's on garden leave and they're still getting paychecks, but all of their Okta or whatever account has been disabled and they're not doing work. I don't think that you're like actually maintaining your status there. And I don't think that you should be delaying your 60-day count until your last paycheck in that scenario. So legitimately continuing to work as long as possible is helpful. And then in that 60-day grace period, you want to find another job as quickly as possible. But if you don't have one by the end of it, you probably your best bet is either a change of status to B1 or B2 visitor to request an additional 6 months of time runway in the United States where you are not able to work, but at least you can be here. And then from there, you can switch back to H1B later. You try to enroll in school, but it's also going to take a really long time. You could apply for an O1 through a company or an agent to allow you to do multiple gigs and pave your way to a faster green card. Or if your priority date's current and you qualify, you could self-petition a green card. Often our Indian clients or Chinese clients will go for an EB1A for extraordinary ability. From other parts of the world or people with a current priority date can also look at the EB2 national interest waiver green card. So there's a variety of things you can actually do. And if you're like stressing that, oh my God, what if this is me? You can take action on a lot of these things now. You don't have to be laid off to chart your path to immigration freedom. And for some people, it's like a kick in the pants of like, oh, I guess I should maybe follow my dream to be a startup founder and be self-employed. And there are ways to do that.
Yeah, I think so. Concurrent H1B, one of the biggest questions I get around concurrent H1B is like, if only 5 hours a week, will my employer know?
So they're not going to know.
How do we address that question?
Okay, so this is a really interesting realm of who knows what when. So if a company lays you off or fires you, the government will know because the company's obligated to inform the government that your H-1B is no longer valid. But if another company sponsors you for an H-1B while you're still employed, either because you're getting a concurrent H-1B or you plan to quit your current job entirely and give notice, nobody finds out. Like the future company typically would never tell your current employer for any reason, although you can certainly double check that with them. Of course, the government will know, but they don't have a practice of notifying the existing employer that a new H-1B has been filed. So really where this could come up is potentially on your I-140 petition, or maybe your PERM, or certainly in your I-485, they want to know all of your employment history. So by that time, you're going to need to be willing to disclose it all. In general, because we represent a lot of employers, but also individuals in the startup world, you know, I think that a lot of the forward-thinking tech companies really care about their people. And so I've definitely had clients that have had that conversation with their current HR of like, hey guys, I need some additional security for my family. I understand that there's some, you know, transition here at the company, and I'm just, you know, need you to know I'm going to be working on this other thing, totally unrelated. Here's what it is. And even like the big FANG companies, they have committees where if it's like Google or Facebook, like you petition the committee to be able to do a startup on the side, and it goes through a review process. So it just depends on how sophisticated and large the company is and what type of activities, but there's ways to fully disclose it. And I've seen people do that and successfully navigate the process. And also you don't have to, but it might come up at some point. And that immigration lawyer that is helping your company do your green card, they're the company's lawyer. They're not your lawyer. So whatever you tell them, they tell the company. So if you don't want them to know about your employment or your DUI or whatever, like that's when you have to hire your own immigration lawyer for your part of your immigration process and have them figure out, how to communicate what to the company.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. The concurrent is something that I covered from one of your posts, dear Sophie. I think it was like a year ago, where you talked about for startups and that 49%, right? That's kind of the barrier in the founder startup for H1B. The 49% equity ownership is the key there. The thing that you said about the when the time starts from notice of severance is something that's interesting to me as well. I get asked a lot, and I always
have different opinions on it, and I think a lot of people are going to try to get away with it. But if you were fired from Twitter in November and you're getting paychecks through January, I don't think you should try to count your grace period into March, because the USCIS officers read the paper. They know that Twitter did all their layoffs in November. Like, they're not stupid. They're part of the fabric of American culture.
This rule of 30, I call it, is like, hey, generally from when your last date of employment was and then your last pay stub. For me, as an employer, I look at like that's probably the maximum allowable when, if I'm trying to look at it from an employment perspective, right? Like, as an employer, I don't want to go any further than that if they can't provide that pay stub. But the date is interesting.
So how do you define that rule of 30? What do you interpret that as?
Yeah, I would say that from the date of like the last pay stub, right? Okay. So if the severance date, let's go by November 15th, right? And for me, let's say the last pay stub was December 15th, there was severance and maybe some back weeks or whatever. I, as an employer, wouldn't want to look at filing anyone who couldn't provide a stub that was within that 30-day window from the 15th of December to the 15th of January.
So like within the most recent 30 days before you're actually going to file.
Yeah, it's that the risk becomes too great as on the employer side, because there's such a financial commitment, right? There, as you mentioned, the legal fees and then the filing fees both. And when we talk about risk from an employer perspective, employers want to mitigate as much risk as possible. The demand and the need for the talent is there. It's just a matter of being able to provide the appropriate evidence as part of the application process. And specifically, if it's requested, you've got to be able to produce it. And that's where those lines get really gray, really quickly.
And real practically, what this actually is your future employer's immigration lawyer is going to just tack your last 3 pay stubs into the package and assert that you're within the grace period. And the level of the depth of the adjudicatory process, right, is variable, and your company is probably, different companies are going to approach it in different ways depending on what you advise, what their immigration lawyers advise. Some of them might say like, no, not worth it. This person has a valid multiple entry H1B visa. Let's just have them go to Canada and come back in. Like, it's fine. Let's just wait for the thing to be approved. So it really depends. But for somebody who doesn't have a visa, who's from India, for whom it's really hard to get a new visa, for example, maybe the calculus becomes a little bit different. And then it's like, okay, how do we, in good faith, disclose everything in such a way that if USCIS, looks, they can see everything, but it's up to them on how they want to do it, because they have discretion in this whole thing as well.
Absolutely, yeah, and they're going to be the end all deciding factor at the end of the process. Wanted to just ask a quick question around the B1, B2, because this has come up as well. So is that something that an individual can do on their own? Is it recommended to use an attorney to do the B1, B2 change of status? And then coming out of the B1, B2 change of status to going back to H1, can that processing be done while they're still in the country? Do they have to leave the country and go through consular processing? What are the steps for that?
Okay. I wish my law firm could help all the people who need to do a change of status from H1B to B1 or B2. We simply do not have the capacity. So we have a variety of resources for just like self-help, like here's some education, here's how you file an I-539 change of status, like here are the questions to pay attention to, here's how to include your family members. A lot of people do these themselves.
Okay.
Certainly there are a lot of situations in which it's really important to get legal advice on how to interpret the questions, how to answer the questions, how to have a solid application. But USCIS allows for e-filing if you don't have a lawyer, but if you got a lawyer, you're not allowed to e-file. So like
that has to be paper.
Yeah, it's like to your advantage to not use a lawyer because we can't e-file for you. So it's kind of messed up. But you know, that being said, you just want to be careful about the types of activities that you're asserting that you're doing. You want to make sure that if you're seeking B2 tourist status, that you're not going to be working on any startups or creating new companies, that you are truly just going to be, you know, visiting your family or receiving your medical care. But certainly if you have kids, I would say that they could probably still stay enrolled in public school for that transition. The B1 would be if you're going to like go to conferences, educational events, get a certification, talk to investors about start funding your company that you want to start. So you just want to be really careful. In neither case are you allowed to be employed or earn money. So that's something to be really cautious about. But then,
are those typically issued in 90, 180 days?
They're usually, okay. So this is, okay. Yeah. So you've raised a lot of great points. Typically the status is granted in 6-month increments.
Okay.
And it's independent. When you're doing a change of status inside the United States, it's an independent process from whatever visas you may or may not have in your passport. So it's separate from if you ever got ESTA or if you have a valid B1, B2, if you're staying in the country and doing an I-539 change of status. Now, the screwy thing is that because USCIS is still working really hard to decrease the COVID backlogs, the last I checked, the processing times for changes of status to B1 and B2 were taking anywhere from a year to 2.5 years, depending on the service center for where you live. There's no premium processing. So let's say your 60-day grace period runs out on February 28th and you don't have a job offer yet, and you decide to file your change of status to B1, B2 with a requested start date of March 1st. You would be allowed to be in the US while you're waiting while the government's making a decision. So if they deny it on April 1st, you would have to leave. But if it's still pending, so March, April, May, June, July, August, if it's still pending at the end of August, you're allowed to just, you know, be chilling in the US and doing nothing, or doing whatever you said you were going to do. So there's a chance that you might not actually get an answer on whether your March to August chilling was okay until like 2025. So you got to work with your company's immigration lawyer for your subsequent job to make a plan with them of, do I wait? Do I link these chains of changes of status together? If you change status from B2 back to H1B, you have to wait for the H1B approval to start working. You're not allowed to start working on receipt, unlike if you get transferred in the grace period. So
that would be a case for premium processing then, right?
It would be, but then sometimes as an immigration lawyer, sometimes we get an RFE saying, hey, show us your adjudication of your B2. And we're like, you're USCIS, we don't have it. You guys haven't made a decision yet. Here's our receipt notice from the other case. Can you guys like speed it along? So sometimes in those situations, it's like, like it would just be better to leave and come back in if that person can, you know, has a visa. But that's like so individually specific. But so you got to talk to a lawyer about that. But ultimately, my dad was an immigration lawyer, and the way he described it was it's like a chain, and you need every link of the chain to connect. And sometimes you get to the end of the chain and you look backwards, and then you just want to make sure in retrospect that they're all connected, but somehow they all have to be connected. But if you need to reset it, you got to leave and come back in. And you also want to make sure that you're never out of status for more than 180 days, because that can lead to big problems as well.
That's interesting. Last question on these layoffs around the I-45 adjustment of status. One of the things when you're doing PERM, right? Employers certify that there have been no layoffs in the last 12 months. Do you see any impact of this in the next year?
Yeah, this is like the hidden side of this. It doesn't just affect the laid off workers. It affects all of the immigrant employees that were not laid off that need to get PERM. Companies that did layoffs will probably have to wait at least 6 months and then restart many PERM processes after that. So there are types of green cards that do not involve PERM. And so if you're at a company that did layoffs, they could sponsor you for an EB-2 national interest waiver green card. You could also self-petition that, but it doesn't involve PERM. You'd have to make an argument for why you specifically are in the national interest and why it's okay for them to not do PERM. We also see that for the EB-1 category for researchers, for intracompany transferees like L1, for extraordinary ability folks. So there are ways that companies can still do green cards without PERM post layoffs.
That EB-1A I get asked about a lot, and there's just a lot of documentation that goes into that you have to have.
Yeah, and this is why I started the Discord group that I shared with you. So
I'll bring that up right now.
Okay,
I'll go ahead and share that link and post that in the chat. And while I do that, I did want to mention, if any of you out there have any questions or comments for Sophie, please post those in the chat, and we will get to those at the end. So just shared that right there. There is the Discord link.
Yeah, so this is a group for people who want to get green cards in the EB-1A category, the EB-2 national interest waiver category, or even an O-1 visa, any of these things that are related to extraordinary ability or national interest, and you want to be able to do it yourself without an employer, or rack up those accomplishments so that you can qualify. We'd love to welcome you to that group.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing that. And I'll add that into the video description after we're done with today's session as well. So wanted to pivot to the H1B lottery.
Yes. I love the predictions. I'm so curious to hear your thoughts too.
2 weeks ago, they came out. A lot of been asking, and I've been saying since November, I expected end of January that they would come out with the date. And I expected it would be March 1st. I thought the window would actually be a week longer than it was. I thought they would run it through kind of the next week, which I think is the 24th or 25th is that Friday. And for me, I really felt like, this, when the notice for proposed rulemaking that came out, the $215 increase, and we can talk about that later too, but I started to look at some of the dates, and I was like, well, there's no way they would push this until April 5th and try to implement this like immediately. And there's a lot of confusion around it. And it was good that they clarified, look, March 1st through the 17th, pre-registration starts the week before, I believe, kind of the end of February. $10 non-refundable registration fee. Employers can only register an individual once, but individuals can have multiple employers register them, which is kind of one of these things that's been labeled the fraud of this electronic registration and selection process, because we saw 275,000 in 2020, 315 plus in 2022. And then for 2023, it was 483,000, right? Like almost 500,000 registrations. And so, I think I'm really unsure right now. I feel like there's going to be excessive demand still. I still feel that way. I
also think it's the best chance ever for small companies.
Bingo. And I know a lot that are going in on OPT and OPT STEM folks that they've hired full time, and they said this is our chance, specifically in that advanced degree category. but I still think there's going to be over 400,000 registrations, and
You
folks are looking
do?
at me like I'm crazy
Oh man.
because of the mass layoffs that have been going on, of all of the movement. But again, let's talk about the value of the H1B. It still remains extremely high. The ability for employers to bring in high skilled workers from wherever they're located around the world, and then folks that are already here in the U.S. on a different status, H1B gives them that opportunity to get on a dual intent and go down the PERM labor green card employment based sponsorship. So
we're still like 1 million plus international students in the US at any given time. And that's like our system so needs to be overhauled. One of the places is really students have to have non-immigrant intent. You're going to come to one of the richest countries in the world, get a top level education, and then, oh, I'm excited to go to my home country, you know, maybe for like a handful of countries, right? That makes sense. But for most people, it's like, go to America, live the American dream, stay, put down roots, get a green card. Like, let's be real, right? So
yeah, come here and get US educated, pay tens of thousands of dollars, and then only have 12 to 36 months to find an employer who's then willing to sponsor you. Like it is broken when you think about that, right? And that you start to talk about US educated now, whether they've come here and with the intent to be here in the long haul, they've come here and wanted to work here for a little bit. Experience
full tuition for our expensive U.S. educational system.
Yeah. So I've long thought that we would see an increase in that advanced category on the overall like H cap allotment. I've thought I may move that number up closer to the allotment on the international side, which is 65,000, right? And there's 20,000 available in the advanced degree.
You think that you want them to move increase the master's cap set aside?
I've heard some rumblings that could be something that we could potentially see in the future.
That would be amazing.
But one of the comebacks to that is, well, if there needs to be restrictions on country of origin, right? For H1Bs. Yes.
And we got to get rid of the country of origin. It's so discriminatory.
Correct. And I just don't see a world where that works. And I think you're seeing a lot of this climate change around the H1B visas. It's viewed, the demand is still really high, but individuals that have been here working in the U.S., regardless of where they're from, that have been on H1B visas, have talked about how restrictive it is. And so I think this concept of this is the number one way for high skilled immigrants to come to the U.S. is on H1B visa. But now it's becoming one of the most negative portrayed as it relates to like the lifestyle and the restrictiveness of being on it. But what are you seeing from your end? Are you still seeing, increased demand in lottery cases? Do you think we're going to see 400,000, or am I overestimating here?
I think that it's an amazing opportunity for small businesses and early stage businesses to put people in the lottery. I know that students are being approached by not only main employers, but also like technology consulting companies to offer them multiple roles and have multiple chances at the lottery. If you're a beneficiary going through this, you can be sponsored by different companies, but each company can only sponsor you once. So I just don't know how much I don't know if there's like, if that's happening, to what extent that's happening of people getting lots and lots of lottery registrations from different companies. And the demand for H1B from talented professionals is really high, and America has this labor shortage still. So if anything, there's like a matching problem. And if we had I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this. Like, what if we had a system like Canada where some government commission is like, oh yes, we need more software engineers. Let them apply for themselves, and they have to maintain employment for X percentage of the time to prove their status. That would take employers out of the equation. We could do what the economy needs. I think there could be a lot of value in that, but just the way we're structured, it's like, you know, you can just imagine people getting off ships in Ellis Island, like, here's my letter from the company that needs me to come. Please let me in to your golden door, America.
Yeah.
It's a very antiquated system, and these dependencies are why then we're like, oh, H1B again, there's another problem. These people weren't treated well. Like, we need, but it's just the fundamental incentives of the legal system are set up.
Yeah, it is. And when it was put into play, right? You go back to, you know, kind of its current form, and originally 1990, then early 2000s was changed.
Ellis Island, but it just
right
from that era.
It does. Yeah, the 50s, right? I mean, we can go back and trace it back to the 50s. Yeah, when I first launched this channel in kind of mid 2020, you know, I was brainstorming ideas on what would a points-based immigration system look like here in the US. And there had been, I refer to it as the Cotton Bill. The senator from Arkansas had a points-based immigration piece of legislation that he had introduced into the Senate. But I refer to it as like an H1B EAD, where there would be some qualifications to point totals, right? You know, command of the English language, education, age has to be part of it, skill sets, right? And that individuals could self-petition, apply for this H1B EAD that would then give them, you know, kind of a temporary status, whether that's 3 years or 4 years or whatever would come up with. I think the way it currently is constructed, I feel like we're not going to see any immediate change, but it does really have this feel to me, Sophie, like in the next 10 years, I hate to say it like that, in the next decade, it sounds crazy, but I do think we will see some significant changes to not only the lottery and the way H1Bs are assigned or selected for non-exempt. I think we'll see increases in the duration eligibility for the timing around H1Bs. And I think too that there may be a possibility to extend H1B time without having to go down a perm labor, a green card, permanent resident sponsorship for employment base, which makes it temporary, right? And if an individual wants to come live and work here, kind of similar to the way the TNs work from Canada and Mexico, 2 to 3 year increments, and not be considered dual intent, then that may be looking at another type of visa. But I don't know if
employers would love it if they didn't have to deal with this. If you could just hire people and you wouldn't have to, you just find me the right person.
Yeah.
That would be so great. And then just the amount of, God, it's like the amount of brain power that it takes people to navigate this system. Like, we could be using that to cure cancer or stop climate change or
it's so complex.
National security.
It's so complex. And then you're dealing with the US government who, unfortunately, you don't want staring at you, right? When it comes to audits or ICE visits or whatever that may be as an employer, that's like your biggest fear. And employers, when they start to go, hey, we've got an individual that's on an H1B that we want to sponsor, and they reach out to me and I explain to them kind of what that process looks like. And we start to talk about time costs, legal and filing fees associated with it.
Yeah.
Their eyes, I watch, they start to go googly, right? They're just not, they understand, but they go, wow, this is so complex.
Right.
It's no wonder that, like, I work with staffing firms primarily. It's no wonder that I have a channel and a website dedicated to talking about this because of how complex it is. And to hear you say that and reaffirm it to me.
Oh, it's so freaking complex. it's such a tax on creativity and business potential. And even like, if you want to go into the national interest aspects of it, I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, the Biden and Trump administrations agree that it's in our national security to recruit tech talent to the United States. Like, we need tech talent here. They both administrations put it into their national security plan that we need to encourage high-skilled immigration to the United States. And so I think taking employers out of it, I mean, I'm grateful for the opportunity to serve people, as I know you are too, but
yes,
I'm confident in my ability to navigate and be able to provide value to people if this immigration system gets cleaned up. So that's really what we have to advocate for over the coming
no, there's no doubt that
years.
like, as you said, it's about the brain power behind it, right? And like moving with the cheese, right? That's the famous book that's out there.
I love that. I read that book to my kids. I love that book.
Yeah, it's a great book, right? But I think that's the point, is that it's so complex. It's so complex for individuals. It's so complex for employers, and probability to be selected via the lottery is 26, 27%. Right.
Lucky,
and that's just a general number.
Maybe it's going to be like 30% or something this year.
Yeah. And it depends. They'll break down those numbers, and we won't know that until, towards the end of the year.
One thing that I was surprised about last year was there was no second lottery or third lottery or fifth lottery. They like got their calculations correct.
Well, they selected 127,000 for 85,000, and
oh, but I wonder if the flake rate's going to be different this year because of the layoffs.
I wonder too. Yeah, the application rate, right? Like, and what will that look like on their selection rate? Right. But the interesting thing, and I still have some folks that were selected, applied, met the June 30th deadline, that still reach out to me and say, my case still hasn't been approved. Crazy, right?
Oh my goodness.
And I'm like, well, they're like, well, what can I do? And I always say,
is it the petition or is it the visa?
Yeah, it's the petition in and itself. And I'm like, you need to have your attorney reach out to their USCIS liaison.
Way beyond processing times, and especially if they got premium processing, and maybe they ran out of numbers and there's some extras that never got adjudicated.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder too if this was because, going back to your May point, when the layoffs started, if there was a flooding of applications that came in right at that June 30th deadline, and then it just overwhelmed them. And here we are. That's still, I mean, I guess we are 6 months away from that date at this point. To not have the case fully approved would absolutely be a concern for me. And that's, why they're asking me these questions too. So, but I thought that was interesting. I was wondering if you had heard of
but on the other hand, if you didn't use premium processing, maybe it's just normal. Oh, it's 9 months or whatever.
Yeah, I always tell individuals, if you can afford it, request it of your employer and offer to pay for it if they're not, because it gives you peace of mind.
Yeah, and beneficiaries can pay for it if it's not required by the employer.
It just does.
That's a big advantage. Yeah.
Well, still going to have high demand, I believe. Really interested to see what that looks like.
You think over 400,000?
I do.
Okay, I'm gonna go with 375 or less.
Okay.
So let's see.
Yeah. So I'll mark that and timestamp this at 43 minutes plus, and we'll come back and check on that when they put out the data. Yeah, I think that's.
But what if we're both wrong? What if there's 600,000? Because everybody's thinking about H1Bs and layoffs and tech companies and demand and supply and jobs and openings and vacancies and positions, and who knows?
I never thought there would be 500,000, but we were there last year.
I mean,
you remember the days of the paper applications, right? And like everything that went into that before that April 1st to have that in FedEx and in the.
I will tell you, back in my day when I was a young lawyer in 2008, in the whatever the 2008 recession thingy was, we were still doing H1Bs into like November because there was no lottery. because less than 85,000 people.
Yeah, the demand wasn't meeting the annual allotment.
And then if you roll back in time even before, there had been that additional allotment in the wake of the whole Y2K thing of like, oh God, we need extra engineers to like recalculate the dates. So we're gonna do more H1Bs for several years. So there was no lottery then, and there was just an abundance of H1Bs available.
Yeah, no, they want to use them all, right? Like they want to be able to assign them out. They meaning USCIS.
People who work for USCIS, they very faithfully uphold the law and try to execute the program according to the congressional intent.
So I've got one last question around the proposed increased fee, and then we'll close out the lottery discussion. I know you wrote about this and you covered a lot of the increased fees and the why behind the Department of State and USCIS, but I had kind of pontificated on this $10 non-refundable fee being such a low barrier to entry that it has increased the demand from that electronic registration. Certainly. So my thoughts were, as I said, like maybe they raised it to 100. 100's not enough. Maybe it's 500. Maybe it's 1,000, and they make it non-refundable. $215 is what they've proposed, and being enough. Maybe it curbs some of the registrations as a whole, but I don't see that having a real impact when employers are going, that 215 is worth it to me. If I lose it, great. It's like literally gambling is what it comes down to.
A company that's paying an immigration lawyer hundreds of dollars an hour doesn't care if it's $10.
No,
200.
That's why I said 1,000.
So maybe they're just trying to cover their overhead with needing more adjudicators and trying to get through the backlog. Maybe it was calculated to cover their costs more.
Yeah, it could be. And I'm not good at math, but 215 times 400,000 is a lot of revenue for USCIS when we look at the
that's $86 million.
Wow. Yeah.
They could charge 1,000 and nobody would blink.
Yeah. I mean, I think you'd see some curb at the 1,000. I think that is the threshold. I really do. Because I think you've just got some very conservative employers out there that say, wait, I'm going to spend $1,000 and there's no guarantee. That's where you'll start to see the pullback, is when employers start. So
what we do in the firm, in Alcorn Immigration Law, is we credit the employer's payment for participating in the lottery. So when a company hires Alcorn to put its candidates in the lottery, whoever gets selected, we credit that towards their ultimate H1B legal fee. So the government could do something like that, like it's $1,000, but you get to deduct it from your filing fees later if you're selected. That's a way to make it more.
Which, if it's electronic filing, they're not having to return paper checks, right? Because that was a significant cost for them in the old system.
Crazy.
So we kind of alluded to the green card backlog earlier. I don't want to really get into this extensively, but it continues to grow. Visa Bulletin came out yesterday. Retrogression in EB4 and a few of the other categories. EB1, 2, 3, no real movement. And from everything I'm seeing and reading, it looks like, number usage is already pretty much allocated. I don't know if we'll see any movement maybe in April or May. I think we'll see some potentially, but that's really it. It's kind of a grim picture after what we saw in 2021 and 2022 and EB3 category in 2021 and EB2 last year in 2022. I think you hit it on the head, which is like the country caps piece is really the biggest thing that needs to change.
I think so. But then if you removed the per country quotas without increasing the total allotment, then it German person, I don't know, my mom's from Germany, then German people will have to wait 4 years for a green card and nobody's willing to tolerate that. But somehow 150 years if you're from India. I don't know, like somehow.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest like pro and con of that. So there has to be, if you're going to remove the caps, you have to increase the allocation or the annual allotment. And I think that's been one of the biggest, you know, kind of hangups in the House and the Senate, and as they've debated some of this reform. But to me, it's something that has to be addressed.
Here's my frustration with all of this is that we lump everybody together under immigration, but really it's like 20 different things that we're solving as a country. One thing is, how competitive do we want to be economically with the rest of the world so that the next wave of innovation happens in the United States and not elsewhere? Another thing is like, how many workers do we want to have so that our companies can deliver the most value and, you know, pay taxes and create jobs? And another thing is like, how do we compassionately want to welcome newcomers to our shores who are from lands of unsafety, right? Or, you know, how do we feel about helping children who were brought here as babies, who are part of the fabric of our society? But they're all different, like they're completely different things, but they all get shoved into immigration. You know, we have a 20-year lobbying truce on how comprehensive immigration reform needs to work. And so if you're part of a faction, there's like this nervous, delicate balance where it's like people aren't going to move forward and push for change unless everybody can get their thing. But like what those things are, you know, it's so frustrating.
It is. And I think that I thought that the comprehensive would be what we would see. I really did. I thought that would be something that we'd see under the Biden administration. Now I don't believe that. I've seen
like Obama chose healthcare, right? They picked their thing, and
exactly.
It's like, just to be real, there's so many farm workers and restaurant workers and domestic workers that are here without authorization, and there would be a huge cost to legalizing their statuses because right now they're working under the table and Americans get away with paying them cheap wages, right? So there's this, it's such a complicated socioeconomic thing, but at least from the perspective of business immigration, the system's really broken. So if we care about helping U.S. businesses succeed, we definitely need H1B and green card reform, because the world's most brilliant people are begging to come here, but we're not letting them in.
Right. And that's that smaller piece of like standalone legislation that's going to have to happen, or
I tried to do it.
Executive order, right? Like something along those lines.
I tried to do it, Rob, with the startup visa. I helped Representative Lofgren. I got to help write the bill that the House passed last year. And they tried to throw it into like a science research bill to get startup founders in here. And like it couldn't get through the Senate. So it's like back to square one. And then the regulatory change takes forever, and it can be, you know, caught up in litigation the way DACA has been. So I don't know, but we'll figure it out.
Keep talking about it. So wanted to spend maybe like 2 minutes on 2023 predictions and then do like a rapid fire Q&A and wrap this up, if that's okay.
Okay, great.
So anything 2023, you know, we're mid-February now. Anything that you think will happen by the end of the year that we're not talking about right now?
I'm still hopeful about increasing the grace period. I know that there's people in Washington looking at that. I also am aware of some recent changes that are going to make the age calculation better for children aging out. So that would be nice. And there's also a new push for DACA. But I think for the most part, you know, maybe backlogs will increase. Maybe it'll be a little easier to get visas, but I think business immigration is mostly sadly going to stay the same. So if you're, you know, in the system as a beneficiary, definitely look at green card alternatives as opposed to waiting for an EB2 or EB3 priority date if you're from India or China.
Yep, I agree with you 100%. I think it's going to be a lot of the same of what we've seen kind of the first 2 years of the admin. Well, let's roll through these questions really quickly, and then we'll wrap up here in a few minutes. So,
Okay.
Sharaf asks if can someone qualify if the publications are old? Example, back in 2012, 2013. He's asking for that EB1A is what he's asking
Oh,
for.
yeah. We can certainly use that. We just have to show how it's tied to your current field of extraordinary ability. But absolutely.
Awesome. So there isn't an expiration on the publications per se, or is there
Yeah,
like
sometimes like a startup founder's like, oh, hey, Sophie, I was on the Slovak national gymnastics team in college. Can I use the National Europe Gymnastics Awards? Like, do you have a gymnastics startup? No, we're doing healthcare. Well, okay, no, we can't use it. So we have to show how it relates to what you're doing and contributing. But yeah.
But that's good to know there's no like expiration per se. I think that's important. Ferlina says, hi, Sophie. I attended your webinar prior to this too. Is there a minimum amount of years you have to be in America to apply for EB2 NIW on H1B? I'm in my second year.
This is the thing, Rob. Immigration's so confusing that people end up making up requirements that aren't there. So yeah, no, there's no requirement to being born in a certain country. There's no requirement for being in the United States. People can apply for green cards in any country in the world. How fast it goes and whether you can travel in and out might be affected. But yeah, if you're a Malaysian person in the US now in your second year of H1B, you could absolutely look at applying for an EB2 National Interest Waiver green card as a self-petition.
That's great. And she had a follow-up question that said, is there a window of time to apply for H1B transfer? Can we apply whenever? How long would it take? There's no window, right? Like you, based on your validity
so there's
dates,
like
your 3 and 6 year
typically maximum that you can recapture. But we have some companies like that hire like somebody who's on cap gap at the end of their STEM OPT and they got selected in the lottery and they're waiting for their H1B to kick in October 1st. Like sometimes there's another company that's poaching them. So they do 1 day of work on their H1B at the company that got them through the lottery and then they could transfer to the new company. There's no.
I always advise 30 days in that situation.
Safer because then you get a pay stub.
Yes, exactly. That's one of the, I've seen it done, but 30 days is a lot safer. Primanoth asks, why is there no movement for the March visa bulletin for EB3? And he's talking about the interfiling apps between EB2 and EB3. I'll take this one, Sophie. There just aren't numbers. Like we can look at it, but the numbers are oversubscribed already for the year. And so again, this is going to be kind of the status quo unless we see slight movement in EB3 once those interfiles for those that went up or down, depending, start to be calculated.
And Rob, here's something that you might know about. I'm so curious about. The State Department tracks all of this with the visa bulletin, and Charlie Oppenheimer's the genius, and I hope he lives forever. But and like the field offices like call in or look up like, oh, do we have any more numbers to adjudicate this green card in our office? But I feel like any of the engineers who are on H1Bs who do software could figure out how to automate the whole priority gate visa bulletin system to make it real time. It's like I had a high gas bill.
There are some sites that are dedicated to it, and they've got some serious algorithms out there. But it's literally rocket science for sure. You know, Charlie's a government liaison now for an immigration firm. I don't know if you knew that, but he hasn't been doing the bulletin.
Who does the bulletin?
He's been very quiet, whoever it is. I remember I'm forgetting his name, but I know it. I should have written it down, but yeah, that's it's crazy. So your point is extremely
it's sort of
valid.
like it's cold here and I had a high heating bill for my house and I called and I'm like, hey, I just got the monthly thing, but how do I change the programming on my heater morning and nighttime to know how much I'm using on a daily basis? And they're like, oh, we don't have smart meters yet, so you can't have a daily rate thing. I feel like that's the difference we need. We need like real-time live dashboard
Well, and exactly. Yeah. And it's the transparency behind it, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that's what creates
Yeah.
the unrest. So I think this is a good question here about applying for H1B without a relevant
Oh yeah,
degree.
employers can definitely help you with this. Basically, if you graduated in another field, or you dropped out of college, or you never went to college, there's a calculation for an H1B where 3 years of work experience in the field can be equivalent to 1 year of a college degree in the US. And also it can be helpful if you got a three-year bachelor's degree in your home country instead of a 4-year bachelor's degree. So that's where your employer would work with an educational credential evaluation service. You could get letters from prior employers demonstrating your work experience in the field. So yeah, it's totally doable.
And the more specialized in the field, like specifically in engineering, whatever that may be, you know, and the more years of experience you have, the easier it becomes, I think, too, just in my experience. 2 more quick questions, and then we'll wrap this up, okay? What's the most promising changes to the H1B that you're excited about? Arjun says he's personally looking forward to in-country visa stamping. This is a huge game changer, right?
Thrilled about this.
Yeah, me too.
He's going to be amazing.
Yes.
They're doing the pilot. So just to recap, if you missed it, I saw this in the Wall Street Journal over the weekend. They're going to do a pilot program for the State Department so that you can do in United States visa stamping for H1Bs and L1s. And I really hope it extends to O1s, but it's thrilling. Apparently the State Department did this in the early 2000s.
2004 was the last time that they did it.
It's amazing.
Crazy. Yeah.
It's amazing. Yeah.
And think about how things would have been different during COVID, right? And you know, how this could have been, some of these nightmare stories could have been easily avoided, you know?
Yeah.
Last question. I'll just answer this. Lager's asking about premium processing. You pay it before, as part of the registration, I believe, right? Or is it, if selected, it's at the application process? Okay. Yeah. So if selected, it's once you're selected, then it would be part of the application process. So
yeah. So if you're selected and your employer isn't just doing it, you can say, hello, I would like premium processing. I would like to pay for it. It's currently $2,500.
Awesome. I'm going to bring up the Discord link one more time, just as a reminder. So here that is for everybody, and I'll post that in the video description below. I've got all of Alcorn Immigration Law, the website, social channels. Subscribe to Sophie's YouTube channel, the Alcorn Immigration Law YouTube channel. Their Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, follow them on LinkedIn, like all the places, right? And now Discord too, which is probably right to you and even better. If I'm someone listening, I'm going here for sure. But Sophie, thanks for spending over an hour here with me and all the folks on the channel. It blew right by, right? Like
I know you were like, well, look, if it's slow, we'll just cut it early. We'll save everybody. But I didn't even realize more than an hour had passed. It's so much fun talking with you.
No, I had some people tell me that our podcast was one of the better conversations they've heard me have. So I'm really looking forward to what the feedback is here from this. I know for me it was really thrilling, and I'd love to make hopefully this an annual thing, have you on before the lottery, and we can make predictions and, you know, try to solve all of the problems.
Pull you into whatever my lobbying government
would love to
things are.
Please,
I need you on this.
Yep. If we remain silent, nothing will change, right? And I think that's the greatest thing. We live in the greatest country in the world. We have the freedom to make choices for ourselves. And one of the things I've always talked about is I don't want us to get behind in our innovation and technology advancements, because we've led the way for decades. And if we continue to restrict immigration and make it more and more complicated and difficult for individuals to come here and live that dream that we talked about, our generations behind us will be the ones that will suffer from that.
Yeah. And you're in Georgia, right?
Correct. Yep. I'm in
I have no idea what your political affiliation is, but if you can get yourself elected as a Republican senator from Georgia, and I can get in as a Democrat senator from California, we'll have the great H1B alliance.
Yeah. Well, you know, I would say I'm probably purple. would be the best way that I would describe my affiliation.
Let's just start a pro-immigration party. PIP.
Yeah, maybe we'll call it the purple part. Those lines. Maybe that was. I don't know. We could spitball that more, but no, that means a lot coming from you. I always talk about advocacy has to start at grassroots, and you have to speak up, because if you just sit back and you want to be a keyboard warrior, that's one thing. But if you want to like make meaningful changes, you've got to get boots on the ground and make it happen. So if there's anything I can do for you going forward, absolutely would love to be a part of it. And like I said, just thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. So go follow Sophie and Alcorn Immigration Law on all the channels, and check out her Discord, please. Yeah, there you go. And thank you again, Sophie. I'm going to go ahead and close this out. Again, today's live stream was brought to you by Syndesus and Path to Canada, the ideal plan B for high-skilled immigrants currently located in the U.S. whose status may be uncertain. If you're facing an H1B denial or OPT expiration, don't get caught off guard. Make sure you have a plan B, and Syndesus and Path to Canada are your answers. They'll gladly help you navigate the process. And if you'd like to find out if you qualify, please be sure to use the link in the video description below, and someone from Syndesus or Path to Canada will be in touch. By PERM-Ads.com, the industry leader in providing a seamless experience for employers and immigration attorneys navigating the complex PERM recruitment ad phase of the labor certification process. If you want to reduce your cost and overhead associated with PERM labor certification recruitment advertising, let PERM-Ads.com help you. And by Mob Squad. Are you a technology professional facing U.S. work visa-related challenges? Don't leave your fate up to chance. Our partner Mob Squad has a solution. Mob Squad helps technology professionals facing U.S. work visa-related uncertainty remain working with their current U.S. company nearshore from Canada, as well as technology professionals from around the world who are seeking an opportunity to find a rewarding career in North America. Through their partnership with the Canadian government, they can obtain a Canadian work permit for you and your spouse in as little as 8 weeks. So whether you're looking to stay working with your current U.S. company or you want to find a new opportunity in Canada, please find out how the team at Mob Squad can help you via the link in the video description below. Join the squad. And again, please like this video, subscribe to the H1B Guy channel here on YouTube, and click the bell for notifications so that you're notified anytime we go live like we did here today, 2:30 Eastern on February 15th. Thank you again so much, Sophie, for your time. Thank you to everyone who joined us. And if you've made it this far, thank you so much. We really appreciate your support. Sophie, hope you have a great rest of your 2023. I know we'll be in touch. And
thank you, Rob. We'll talk before then. I want to find out. I want to talk after the lottery numbers come through.
Yeah, we'll. I've got that. It was at the 43-minute mark, so I've got that noted. We've got that documented. And again, thanks for taking an hour out of your day to join me. Just really, really appreciate that. I'm Robert. I'm the H1B guy, your global source for all things H1B.